Hello and good evening. My name is Yorkshire Kris and this is Exotic Gardening Live, and this is my first proper Sunday night live stream that I'll be doing every Sunday, probably at 8 o'clock. That seems to be the most popular time. And in these episodes I'll be answering questions live, I'll be talking to special guests, I'll be saying what I've been doing around the garden and been looking at what's in the gardening news as well. But tonight, hopefully if the technology holds out, we'll be answering some of the questions that have been coming through in the last hour or so since I put the stream up. So a few things before we start. Obviously, hopefully the technology works. I've wanted to do this for quite a while, but because the internet's so bad around here, I've not been able to. I've finally been able to get a decent enough upload speed so I can do these videos in decent quality. And yeah, so we'll just start. So I've been in the garden this last couple of days, not today, but last few days, of tidying up as much as I can, and especially in the greenhouse, going around sort of tidying everything up, getting rid of all the old leaves, looking for bugs on plants as well. And it'll be soon to start really sort of getting the seed packets open and sowing seeds, and I think that's one of the questions we'll be answering tonight, is about what seeds to be sown in February. So I'm just going to go through the questions we've had over the last half an hour or so, and we'll pick out a question to answer. Hello to everybody that's joining this live stream. I think we've got about 50 people watching now, which is great, and we'll see how that goes up and down depending on what I say over the next hour. So the idea is we'll start at 8 o'clock and we'll hope to finish about 9 o'clock. So I won't be able to answer every question that comes through, but I'll answer a selection of those that come through. So let's have a look at what questions we've had between all the spam. So first question came through was from Goran Obid, and it was about how long to store canna seeds in fridge or a shelf. Well, seeds, depending on the type of plant, can last 1 year to literally thousands of years, as been shown recently by some date scenes from the Egyptian tombs of being able to be germinated after a few thousand years, which is absolutely amazing. But generally speaking, seeds 1 to 4 years, depending on the type of plant it's come from. Canna seeds, I normally sow the year after I've collected them, or if I bought them, I sow them the next year. They're quite big, obviously, the big hard seed with a very thick, very hard coating. So I would imagine it'd probably last many years before they would be unviable. So they should last several years, be able to grow them from seed from year to year. But I like to keep all my seeds that I collect and buy in the fridge. So I like to have them sort of dried out in a little paper bag and then put them in the fridge. So they're about sort of 5 degrees, something like that. So they're not getting too warm or getting too cold. They've always lasted really well by doing it that way. One thing you've got to look out for if you're collecting your own seed, and that includes cannas, is if you've got that, obviously the coating around the seeds, the seed pod, if you get a bit of that collected with the seeds and you leave that, that can go mouldy and it can have moisture in it. So you want to get rid of all the material around the seeds and just keep the individual seeds. So if that's berries that you're collecting, it's washing off all the flesh and pulp and just keeping the seeds dry, and then they'll last the longest. So let's see what else we've got. The John Warburton 204 asks about any seeds that I won't bother growing again. The more effort than they reward. Well, it's always fun growing things from seed. You know that some plants that you grow from seed are going to be annuals, and you get sort of instant satisfaction almost, because you know they're going to sow them in spring and they'll grow and they'll flower that year. And nearly everything that you grow as annuals do perform pretty well, put on a good show in the first year. Probably things I won't grow again from seed are some of the palm seeds, to be honest, because they're erratic in many cases to actually germinate, and they can take years to get a decent sized plant. So a really popular palm tree is Jubea chilensis, massive, huge growing palm tree. But unless you're really young or got lots and lots of patience, then growing from seed, you're going to take a long time, basically at least a lifetime, to get a huge plant, substantial plant in your garden, because it takes from seed to a good sized plant. You're looking at a decade to get, a plant that's you'd notice, and then you're looking at 20 to 40 years to get a really big sized plant for your garden for that particular type of palm tree. And some palm trees you'll grow from seed because you can't get them as plants, so it's a great thing to do for that. But it does take many years to actually get a big plant if it's a palm seed, because you're growing trees at the end of the day, so they do take many years to grow big. And some might not germinate at all, and it depends where you buy your seeds from and how old the seeds are. So we talked about viability of seeds. It is still better to get fresh seeds. Fresh seeds germinate more reliably and quicker in a lot of cases, although some can obviously be viable for many. See what else we've got tonight. Evening Derek, Chester Palms. Evening Tom, HD. Evening Lawn 38. Okay, Mint Cake asks about what substrate do you recommend for an arid bed? Well, for an arid bed, you want something really free draining. If you're in the sort of northern hemisphere, in the UK sort of climate, or northern Europe climate, because the plant is going to be grown out of where it should be grown, which is somewhere hot and dry and sunny. Obviously, in the UK, we can get hot, dry, and sunny some days, but our climate is basically cool to mild and quite a lot of rainfall generally. And our soils generally are pretty sort of moisture retentive on the whole, unless you're on chalk, something like that. But generally, I add loads of grit. When I say a lot of grit, I like at least 50% grit, and then some inorganic matter, so some like topsoil and sand and things like that. Don't really want much compost or anything like that, because it can hold on to the water too much in winter. So often when you buy, most plants, it comes in peat still, or at least a stodgy sort of compost. Even if you buy a cacti, it's quite often in a compost, which doesn't really want to be in long term. It wants to be in something really free draining, just to get that water away from the base of the plant, especially when the temperatures are much cooler and cold in winter. So the arid bed I've got, which I've done videos of in the past, is basically, it's the first 30 centimetres of pure grit, basalt chippings I've used, and also just pea shingle as well. And that just stays in there and are planted into that, and then the plants will root through the pure grit into the soil below, because under that obviously I've got my natural topsoil which will root into. And if we get a really bad cold wet, especially wet winter, then the roots that are in the very deep soil might rot off, but it'll be the bottom of the roots will rot off. Top sort of 30-40 centimeters shouldn't rot off, because they're in the more free draining mix, and then they can regenerate the year after next. So yeah, you want something really free draining. In pots, it's more forgiving. If you're growing arid plants in pots, then you can have something a bit more moisture retentive, because you're going to stop watering come sort of autumn anyway. So they like a lot of water in the growing season, because that's when they do the growth. And then you can sort of bring the pots under cover, or at least in a rain shadow, so they're not going to get wet in winter, and then they can dry out. Obviously, if it's moisture retentive, it'll take longer to dry out, but it doesn't matter as much. It's a bit more moisture retentive in pots compared to you're growing in the open ground. So let's see where we are. Lots of questions coming in tonight. So like I said, I'll try to answer as many as I can before 9 o'clock. That's pretty much a cut-off for this week's video. And just to moving forward, not every live stream will be like this. It won't just be like a question and answer session. I will be doing some presentations as well, and like I said, speaking to guests and experts as well. So next week, so 8 o'clock next Sunday, it'll be a live talk. So I'll be doing a beginner's guide to evergreen, hardy, exotic plants, looking at the best plants for your garden. We're showing some nice photographs and talking through those plants. Then you can ask me any questions as we go along. So that's next week's live stream at 8 o'clock. So let's go back to the questions. So just to explain the way I'm set up, I'm in the greenhouse garage conversion. It's dark, it's still in winter, so I'm wearing plenty of layers to keep warm because it's not exactly boiling in here. And I've learned from a test live stream we did on Friday. I put the chat on the screen over there. I've got a drink of coffee as well to keep me going, to keep my voice nice and working, basically, because it was struggling on Friday. Okay, so let's see what else we got. Got a bit of spam. I'm trying to delete as we go along. That's something we're learning about as we do these live streams, is how to stop these silly messages coming up from people that aren't actually watching. Okay, so I don't know who this is, called JH. Hello. Asking about rootless dormant 2-foot sago palm back to life. That's an interesting one. Why is it rootless and dormant as well? I know you can sometimes buy these completely rootless, and it's tricky because you want to get, obviously, the roots to promote root growth, and then you'll get a flush of leaves. So to do that, really, you do need to add some moisture, but not too much that the plant will start potentially rotting before it gets into growth. So I would probably place it on a heat mat, depending on what size it is. Say 2 foot tall. That's quite a big trunk or cordex. If you've got a 2 foot cordex with no roots, I don't know how that's come about, how that's happened that you've got that sort of plant. Basically, you want to get it really warm, promote growth, get that roots growing. So on a heat mat or in a propagator, something like that, a big one, obviously, if it's a plant like that, and then just a little bit of moisture and see those roots, and then sort of you're gonna have to mollycoddle it through this end of winter into spring, and then hopefully it'll be rooted well enough by summer to pot up properly, and then put out in the sun. Hopefully it'll flush new leaves with plenty of water once it's rooted. But it's unusual to have a completely rootless 2 foot specimen. I've seen them for sale where they're sort of big as your fist with no roots, and then you can do the same sort of thing, but you can obviously fit them in a propagator much easier. But it's much better to buy them rooted and potted up. I know all plants are going up in price a lot, and Cycas revoluta is one of those that have got pretty expensive, but I've seen them locally. So the ones where they've got a tiny, smaller than my fist, but not much smaller than my fist, sort of trunk and some leaves. I think they're about £10-15 recently that I've seen. I know when I first bought mine, they were about £3 to £10. They weren't much at all. The big one I've got in the garden, that was, I think I want to say £20 or £40, but that's a decent size cordex on that. So you can pick up bargains from time to time, especially if you buy them from like eBay and places like that, or from if people are selling them locally on marketplaces. If they don't know what they are and they want to get rid of them, you can pick up bargains. You go to some sort of retailers, online retailers, you can be paying top whack for them. They can be, £200 to £500 depending on how big they are. So they are expensive plants, and they're well worth looking after if you've got them, because they're obviously going to cost a lot to replace if you need to replace them in the future. So let's have a look. What else we got? Evening Stuart Bull. Evening Michael. So next question is Tetrapanax T-Rex put on in a standing year. How much growth? Well, this is a question from Rich. So Tetrapanax, once you've got it in the ground, it's a decent sized plant and you can see it's properly growing, it's not sulking. Sometimes it can sulk a little bit for a few months when you first plant them. But once it's happily growing, it will grow. The trunk, the stem will grow sort of like probably about 30 to 60 centimeters on really, really good years a year. So the leaves will be massive, and that's the thing you'll notice. And you won't really notice the height difference until the end of the year when the leaves fall and you can see the framework of the plant. You can see how much height it's put on. I want to say the one at the back that I planted out 7 years ago now, I think it is, it started with about 30 centimeters of trunk. Now I mean, it's at least 2.5 meters of trunk in 6, 7 years. It's grown well, but obviously you notice the leaves first of all because they're getting to be, 50, 60 centimeters up to potentially on some specimens getting close to a meter across. And obviously that covers a big area, and that's something you've got to think about when you're planting Tetrapanax. If you want to see it to its full potential, you really don't want it against a wall. You want it somewhere where each leaf, it's a meter or so across. So that's a meter that way, backwards, forward, in all directions. Then it'll go up a little bit and it'll be doing more leaves and up and up and up, and it'll be absolutely huge. So you need at least, I would say, 2 meters width of ground, 2 meter circle basically, with the trunk in the middle. And that's how much space it's going to cover at the very minimum. And then they can even be bigger than that. So you need a lot of space for them to grow to the full potential. You can grow them against a fence or a wall, but what you'll find is the trunk won't grow straight up. It'll angle out a lot. It'll try to find maximum light, and then it will grow up. So even if you grow it, 30, 40 centimeters away from a wall, it'll end up 1 or 2 meters away from the wall after a few years and then grow straight up. So they might cover a path or cover a bed and cover loads of planting potential if you've planted it in the wrong spot. And trying to dig them up, yes, you can do that. The main plant that's established, if you move a Tetrapanax, might sulk a bit, to be honest, but you will leave behind loads of roots in its previous location, and they will grow loads and loads of plants all over the place. And when you plant somewhere else, that new position, you might find the main trunk, like I said, sulks, and you'll find pups at the ground will often outcompete the mother plant and actually grow quicker and bigger than the main old stem. So you might end up losing or deciding to chop back the old stem, and new growth from side pups will actually outcompete and do better than the main plant. So I would say plant Tetrapanax where you think where you want it to stay basically, and don't move about too much. It will survive moving, but it's not ideal unless you want lots of little pups and lots of new plants all over the garden. It's not the end of the world. It's not like bamboo where the tough stems coming up. They are pretty fleshy, so you can pull the pups dead easy, or you can mow them if they've come through the lawn. But if they go through to next door, then it might cause some issues. So, some more questions. So we have, let's have a look. To come walk and fly with me, ask me if I grow any Cyathea. So Cyathea, for those that don't know, are a type of tree fern, well, a whole group of tree ferns. Unlike the Dicksonias, the ones that we normally see in exotic gardens, Dicksonia antarctica, which are the hardiest ones, and the ones you often buy as logs from garden centres and specialist nurseries. Cyatheas are different because you've got to buy them rooted. You don't want to buy them without any roots because basically they'll die. Unlike Dicksonias, where you can buy them as a log and they'll root very easily, Cyatheas don't tend to do that. They'll just dwindle if they've not been rooted well. So most Cyatheas are grown from spores, and they grow pretty quickly into decent-sized plants. And then you buy them from nurseries and garden centres as a growing plant in a pot, and you'd either keep it potted and keep potting it on, or you can plant out the hardier types if you're in a mild location and protect them in winter. So I have Cyathea cooperi planted out, and that's been out for about, again, 6, 7 years in a shaded location, and I put straw around it. in previous years, I've put old car tyres, like rubber tyres, and filled straw around it, and then put a bit of a plastic cover over the top just to keep it a little bit drier. This year, the snow caught me out a bit that we had in November here. We had 2 days of snow, so back in autumn of 2021, and I didn't actually cover it properly. So the green leaves it had the day before completely got frazzled. I've covered it with straw and everything now, so hopefully it'll make it through winter. Really, it's sort of without any protection, it's sort of -3, -5-ish. But with protection, I've got it through -7 without an issue. Kills all the leaves with a slight bit of frost, but they do grow pretty quickly the next year. The Cyathea australis is the easiest one to come across, and it's a Cooperi, should I say, Cyathea Cooperi, easiest one to come across, and you can, people grow it from spores. You can buy small plants that will grow quickly, and when to get too big to bring indoors, then you can plant them out in a mild location and hope they'll get through most winters. So, good evening, little Buddha. Asking about the best time of year to buy palm and tree ferns, please. So, I would sort of class these separately. I would say for tree ferns, there's not many places where you can buy tree ferns from in the best for the best prices and at the best time of year. What I mean by that is most tree ferns come from the other side of the world. They travel on big ships as logs, and then they come to the UK, normally in spring, and then the best ones are sold straight away, or there's a waiting list. You can get them from garden centres pretty much year round now. I've noticed last 2 or 3 years I've seen them, a few hanging about in garden centres all year round. But normally the new shipments come in spring or late winter, so even sort of February to April. There's a few companies that sell them, and it's best to pick them up in person. But obviously a lot of people like to buy or find it more convenient to do mail order, which you can do, and you buy it basically by the height, so you buy it by the foot. And the prices have gone up substantially, like everything, like I mentioned earlier, in the last 5-6 years. It used to be you could buy a 1-foot tree fern for £20, 2-foot 40, 3-foot 60. Got to 5 foot, and that was £100. And then the 7, 8, 9, 10 footers were priced more than £20 a foot. Generally, up to 5-6 foot, you're paying £20 a foot. Now, if you go to garden centres, it can be £40-50 a foot. The prices have sort of at least doubled, in some cases trebled as well. Once you get over that 6-foot point, then the prices go up a lot because the people shipping them over and getting them on the trucks, they can't fit as many great big tree ferns in if they're a big cumbersome length, like 8-9 foot, whereas you can get loads of 1-2 footers in there, so it's not as it's not as worth them getting massive ones across unless they put the prices up. So I would say look out for the online sellers who are saying they're getting new shipments in spring. There might be a waiting list for them, or you might have to pay for them first. But it's normally worth it because you're going to get the freshest ones that haven't been hanging about. Because although they come dormant, they want to be watered a lot through the years. If they come dormant and then they've been sat in the nursery or the garden centre, to spring, to summer or autumn, they'll have been watered a bit, they'll have sprouted in summer, but if they've not been watered loads and loads and loads, the following year's growth will probably not be as good because they've not been given the best care. Whereas if you buy them as soon as they arrive, sort of like I said, between February and May, depending on when the shipments come in, you're looking after that plant. You can give it the best care and you can water it from day one, keep watering it until you get that good growth, and then continually watering it while it roots away in the ground, and then look after it the best you can. Whereas if you're buying it, like I said, from just a general garden centre where it's not been watered and taken care of as much, yes, it might look great straight away. If it's been pretty dry for 3 or 4 months there, then next year's flush won't be as big and it might start going backwards. So it's best to buy them as soon as they arrive, pretty much to sell out, that season. Palms is a funny one because until recently we had quite a selection of palms that were coming from Europe, and they were mainly grown in sort of Spain, sometimes North Africa, and then they were brought up through Europe and then brought to the UK, and it had quite a wide selection of palms. You had the common palms like your Trachycarpus fortunei, you had a few Brea edulis and Armata as well, things like that. But we had loads of sort of harder to come by palms as well that were coming through, Livistonias and things like that. And now, because of the restrictions in place on pretty much all palm species, you can't get palms to the UK unless they've been quarantined somewhere and recorded 2 years to make sure they're free of many sort of pests and diseases. And most places on the continent aren't willing to do that 2-year quarantine period just for the UK when they've got all the rest of Europe as their market. They can sell that without doing the quarantine, without paying the extra costs that incurs by quarantining plants. They can just sell them as soon as they've grown them or imported them from wherever they've got them from, and then obviously make the money quicker that way. Whereas the UK, because we've got more restrictions on what can come in, quite rightly in many cases, because we don't want some of the diseases coming in, the prices have gone up for the ones that have been quarantined and come through, but the actual selection has gone down, so you don't get many different species coming through at all now. This is sort of also based on the size of the palm. So small palm seedlings and palm seeds can come through fine, pretty much in all cases. But anything, I think it's something like 2 to 4 centimeters of trunk width, has to be quarantined for a couple of years. That may change in the future, but at the moment that's the case. And that's why, again, prices have gone up for palm trees and selection has gone down. So there's not many places in the UK with a big selection of palms all year round. Let's have a look. So, just so you know how I'm filming this, I've got a webcam, I've got a laptop here in the greenhouse, and I'm just reading the comments on my phone, so I'll be looking in a few different places. Let's see, answer a couple more questions. Washingtonia seeds, are they good ones because of how fast they germinate and grow? Yeah, Washingtonia seeds are great if you just want to sort of try growing palm trees, because they do germinate pretty quickly, and pretty much the quickest growing palm you can grow easily. So yeah, it's a good one to try. But obviously Washingtonias, most of us don't have a long-term prospect in the UK. There are some great big specimens in London and the South Coast and some limited other places as well. Because they can take some decent cold when they're big, might defoliate, but then they'll grow back because of fast-growing palms the next year. Whereas some other palm trees that are as hardy as Washingtonia will not grow back because they're so slow growing that then if they get hit a second year in a row, it can weaken and weaken the palm and they'll die off. Whereas Washingtonias, yes, they might be decimated one winter, but the leaves will come back the next year and get on a decent head of growth before the next winter. And if it's a mild winter and they get through, then it saves a bit of energy and it can push on and grow bigger in mild locations. Because wherever you are in the UK, with always a few exceptions, everything I say is always a few exceptions, you're always going to get a bad winter every so often. We've not had a bad winter here, like a proper bad winter. The Beast of the East in 2018, which wasn't diabolically awful here, to be honest, and didn't last too long here. But the real bad winters before that were sort of like 2010 was a terrible one, really bad. And 11, 12, 13, we had some decent cold periods down to -7 and a few 24-hour periods where it didn't get above freezing. But it does vary across the UK, and I'm sure there'll be people who are watching this from all over Europe and maybe across the world don't have to deal with frost as often as what we do here. So Vincenzi Calzoni asks about boxing up tender palms to overwinter them outside with Christmas lights for warmth. So if you are interested in sort of growing palm trees, especially the tender ones, and you're in the UK, you might have come across pictures and videos from the other side of the Atlantic in America, the USA, and Canada, and they're growing palm trees, and also in the middle of Europe, where it's continental cold climates as well, they're growing some quite tender palm trees, even though it can be like -10, -20, or colder, and proper snow for days and weeks at a time. And they're going to extreme lengths to get the palm trees through. They are building boxes, wooden structures around the palm trees. They're putting proper insulation boards and polystyrene around there, properly concealing the plants. It's got no light as such. And they're putting, normally, rather than heat cables, using old-fashioned type of Christmas lights, which do give out heat. Modern LEDs, that pretty much all Christmas lights you buy in the UK now are like LEDs and hardly give out any heat, and wouldn't be useful really for wrapping around palm trees in winter like they do in America. Anyway, so they keep the heat in, put a little thermostat on, and actually keep it frost-free within a great big box to protect their palm trees. I mean, you could go to those extreme lengths. I'm never going to go to those lengths because it's just a step too far, really, for me. I don't want a great big tall structure around polymer fence line in the garden. I don't want to be heating outside like that because it's not a long-term prospect, really, because you're going to have to do that until the palm gets too big, and eventually, you're going to be talking about a palm tree taller than your house that you're going to try to construct a great big box around in some cases. So it's not something I'm contemplating doing, but hats off to the people that do that in America and Central Europe as well, because they can come summer, when not take it all away, it can look absolutely amazing. They've got these great big tender palm trees growing in their location. So, just out of interest for the people that are watching, I think we've got over 100 people watching tonight, which is great. Thank you for tuning in. Hopefully you're finding it interesting and informative. I'd be interested to know where people are from. If they're not from the UK, I recognise quite a few names in this list from the UK, but if there's anybody from America tuning in, or from Europe or anywhere else, say hi in the chat, because that'd be great. And across the bottom of the screen, there's a question for tonight, which was about the weather and this winter and how you found it in your location. Like I mentioned here, it's been mild overall. We've had -4, which isn't too bad. It's nothing I'm going to worry about for 99% of the plants to grow in the garden. Anything in the ground that's dormant, that won't touch it -4, because it's only been down to -4 for few hours at most, normally like an hour at a time on a couple of occasions. The only thing that might be trouble by the -4 was that Cyathea. Pardon me. But generally, like I said, the winter's been really mild, and if I knew every winter was not going to be colder than -4, then there's lots of things you wouldn't need to do. You wouldn't really need to wrap any musabajus because they'll, on the whole, withstand the odd dip down to -4. Yes, they don't want to be -4 for like 24 hours, but an hour or two, it's totally fine. So Kathy Bakers from Columbus, Ohio. That's amazing. Hi there, Kathy. Aruch is from Ireland. Incumbent 2's from Florida. Stuart Bull from Castleford, Cas Vegas, not too far away. Tom asks, how's my Canary Island date palm doing? So that's another plant that's benefited from the mild winter. I've not wrapped it at all. It's completely fine. It's completely green, not been phased by the winter at all. That's in my front garden. I've grown it from, I bought a decent sized plant because Canary Island date palms are not a long-term prospect to my location. I know that. I know I'll get a cold winter one year and it will kill it off. But it's got more chance of surviving more winters if you buy a decent sized plant. I was lucky enough to get one where the base I want to say is like as big as sort of like a honeydew melon, maybe up to watermelon size base. So it's not a proper trunk yet, but it's the beginnings of what you'd call a proper trunk. Obviously the leaves come out the top of it. The bigger you get, the harder it is to begin with, because it's got the cold, the frost has got further penetrate through the trunk and the fibres to get to the heart of the crown before it can cause the damage. It's basically insulated itself by being so big. Smaller plants not got that thick skin basically, and it's very thin, and it's not got far that cold to get through and freeze and kill it off. So I bought the biggest I could, and it's grown for the last 5 years in the front garden. Like I said, the only protection it had was when we had the beast from the east. Just going to have a little bit of a coughing fit for a second, so I'll just mute that so you don't have to hear that. I'll get back to answering the apologise for that. I've not been coughing all day, and as soon as I come in here, start talking, my throat starts getting really tickly. Could be that I'm allergic to something actually in the greenhouse, which I'm not aware of yet. It's every time I start talking here, I do start coughing, unfortunately, which is not great for these live streams, but I will carry on till 9 o'clock answering the questions. So yeah, back to Kenai and Dip. Mine's looking good. I did wrap it up with cable ties in 2018 when the Beast Fleece came. So we had cable ties around it. It was nice and quick to tie it together. And I did have a few layers of fleece wrapped around it, and it was completely untouched by that cold, where I want to say, again, that was more -7 mark, and we had really heavy snowfall for a couple of weeks, lying snow for a couple of weeks. But as soon as that snow went, I unwrapped the palm. So you don't want to be wrapped up for weeks and months at a time for most plants, because they can sort of basically stew and get really humid, and mold can set in, and they're not happy like that in our climate, because it's quite, even though we don't think of humidity in winter, you normally think of hot tropics as being high humidity. The relative humidity in winter in a maritime climate like the UK is really high. It can easily be 60, 70, 80, 90% humidity in winter, relative humidity, and just that bit of moisture wrapped around the crown of a palm tree. It's got fleece around it, and that moisture can cause it to rot. So you don't want the fleece around it for months. In America or in a continental climate where it's really dry, it can be dry cold. So things can be wrapped for much longer, and they won't have that effect of sort of rotting them because it's dry cold. So you'll get nice dry snow rather than a wet slushy snow, for instance. That's one of the major differences in our climates. Maritime and continental climates are very, very different, and we can have different sort of strategies for getting plants through winter. But some plants will grow better in maritime, some plants will grow better in continental style climate. So, scrolling back through the questions. Oh yeah, so JH we talked about the Sago palm earlier, Cycas revoluta. And I was asking why it had no roots on it, and so unfortunately it looks like they're rotted off, or vine weevils ate them on his specimen, so he wants to reroot it. So yeah, you really need to go back to that question again. You're gonna have to mollycoddle that plant through. So if you've got a 2-foot trunk, you want probably, like I said, to keep it on warmth. Basically, it's basically like having a cut in again. You want the warmth at the base to promote root growth. Bit of moisture, but not too much to begin with, and hopefully it'll root this spring. Okay, so Neil Deere asked about tree fern logs. It seems some for sale recently. So if it's got tree fern logs for sale right now, first of all, you need to ask at the garden centre, are they new imports? Are they fresh stock? Very likely, like I said, they come through sort of February to May most years. If it's fresh stock, definitely buy it now. If they say it's been hanging about from last year, don't buy it whatsoever, because if it's a trunk now with no leaves on whatsoever and not looking like it's been in life for a while, it could be completely dead if it's not been watered for like a year. So don't touch it. If it's fresh stock this year, then yeah, go ahead, buy it. I wouldn't plant it out yet. Nothing's going to happen until it warms up a bit. But saying that, you don't want a big log just hanging about, just out in the element. So it's a funny one. If you've got an indoor cold space, so like an complete unheated garage or a shed, perhaps put it in there. You don't want it anywhere warm, but it's going to really dry out quickly. Or if you have not many people do have nowadays, but if you have a cellar, you could probably bring it down there if it's not too big as well. That's ideal in terms of temperature and humidity. But you don't want to plant it out yet, because it's just going to basically stand there in the soil, not doing anything for a while. It's not really going to start rooting until it warms up a bit. And you need to keep it watered. So water it as much as you can. If it's in its awake and manage, and let it dry out a little bit before you want to move it, before you plant it, because obviously water is really heavy. And if you watered a trunk, if it's a big one, a lot, it's going to be hard to move it. Some people advocate getting the tree fern and before planting it, literally sitting it in a pond so it soaks up the water overnight, and then obviously it's going to be extremely heavy, but then it's thoroughly well watered, and then you can plant it that way. I would hold off planting it really back end of March. Probably I wouldn't plant it out until then, and maybe a bit later depending on what the weather's like in March. Could still be frosty and snowy. Frost aren't going to do it too much damage because you've got no leaves to kill off at this stage. But you don't want to, try to plant it in frozen ground. So for now, keep it sheltered and well watered. Kris Chimnell 59 asked, are any plants to be fed at this time of year? No, I don't feed it anything at this time of year. I'm looking around the greenhouse now. If you've got house plants, you can buy like winter feeds, because some houseplants, well, most houseplants will be ticking over and trying to grow because it's warm in the house. But there's definitely nothing in the garden that I'd feed at all yet, other than start thinking about preparing beds for the coming year. So maybe adding some top dressing of manure, or sort of rough compost, that sort of thing, to beds and around plants, which will add a tiny bit of feed, not much really, but a little bit of feed, nutrition. But most plants, especially the more exotic plants, won't be actually taking up many nutrients or new nutrients from the soil until it warms up, because chemically it's impossible for the nutrients to be released when the temperatures are too cold into the roots for the plant to use when it's really cold. Basically, it needs to be warm enough for that that chemical reaction, for that nutrients to come out of the soil and uptake by the roots and then used by the plants. So you often see in spring, when it's been a bit windy, you'll have palm trees especially, where the newest leaves are the spears in the middle. You'll see yellow, and you might worry, thinking, oh, has it got a deficiency or something wrong with the plant? And it's because those new leaves have been pushed by the wind and sort of opened a bit early, and they've not had time to uptake enough nutrients and photosynthesize and to green up quick enough. So basically, the wind is sort of showing you what the leaves are like in the middle, but they're not ready really to be exposed to the sunlight, and there's not enough nutrients available from the soil to get into the plants to green them up, basically. So no, I don't feed anything at this time of year yet, 'cause it's still winter. I know it's, like we said, it's been a mild winter so far, but you know, we could get 2 foot of snow in a month's time. So I always find it snows most around Easter in the recent years. Very rarely do we get stuff around Christmas time, January. It's normally sort of March. I know Easter's in quite late this year. I think it's in April, which hopefully doesn't mean we're going to get snow in April, but you never know. You can get snow well into April in some years. Obviously, like I said, you're watching this all over the world, and if you live down south on the coast, you're not going to probably get snow in April, but up here, up north, you can easily get snow in April, so you don't want to be thinking about putting out tender plants too early. Okay, so let's see what else we got. Okay, so Ainsdale cyclists talking about it's been a mild winter so far in Sefton, which is in the northwest. It has been, like I said, a mild winter for most of us so far. But it's talking about Amesia zygomaris and propagating them. So Amesia, for those that don't know, is sort of a tenderish sort of shrubby plant from Mexico with really interesting leaves that flutter about as it gets dark. They're sort of collapsing on themselves every night. I've done a video about how to grow Amesia zygomaris, what it looks like, its flowers, and dividing it and things like that. Propagating it, you can do in a couple of ways. In late winter, early spring, well, early spring really, when you see an established plant in the ground sort of starting to grow, you'll see the little leaves coming out in various places at the base of the old stems from the previous year's growth. You can pull off one of those old stems and you'll normally get a little bit of growth and a tiny bit of root. That can be potted up and you get a new plant that way. Basically like basil cuttings you're doing that way. Or you can do it a little bit more methodical and actually obviously get a knife or a trowel and sort of dig up and divide proper bits so you've got a decent bit of root and pot that up. So that's one way of propagating it. Another way that's really successful is cuttings, but you can't take cuttings from most of the early growth in the year because the stems will be hollow, and the hollow stems will not root, or very rarely will they root. You want the side stems, which you normally get later in the year, which are firm all the way through, and then you can root those in water, like in the hydropod, or actually just in some redraining compost on the heat mat. They'll root really quickly and really, really easily that way. But you've got to make sure you're not trying to propagate cuttings of hollow stems because they very rarely will root. So you need those firm side shoots, which will be quite hard to find sometimes. If you look carefully at your plant, go near the older growth and look for the side shoots, and they nearly always root dead easy. Let's see what else we got. I'll just check my chat is up to date and it's not frozen. It has frozen. Loads of messages come through I've not seen. Do apologise. Hello, Richard Masterson in USA. Michael's got his Rebecca's starting to sprout already. That's good. Alan Fletcher Hill's asked about weather station holding up. Are you impressed with it? And do you feel like it's accurate? So for those that don't know, I got a new weather station direct from Daytona, USA, because they don't sell it in the UK at the moment. The Weatherflow, Tempest Weatherflow weather station. And I got that sort of, I think it was in October time, and I put it up straight away where my old weather station was. and it's sort of got more modern technology. So normally you measure the wind speed, you get a little rotating little feature where you get the little cups and it rotates and it measures the wind speed that way. This one has no moving parts whatsoever, so theoretically there's less things to go wrong with it. It measures there's a gap in the top of the weather station where the wind will blow through, and the sensors inside that will measure the wind speed. And also the top of the weather station is sort of like a dome, and it's got sensors that feel how many raindrops and what size the raindrops are on that surface and calculate the intensity of that rain and the rainfall, rather than a beaker and a cup and like a tipper thing actually measuring the rainfall that way. So it should mean that it lasts longer and it should be very accurate. And so far I found it to be really good. Temperature wise, it's definitely been accurate. I've got some other like the normal thermometers outside, and it's been a very similar sort of temperatures recorded on that compared to my weather station. And you can compare to other weather stations. They're all connected, so all the data from my weather station is uploaded onto the Tempest website, and I've connected it so the signal goes through to the Weather Underground network, so you can see, anybody can go on this, you don't need a weather station. Weatherunderground.com, go to your part of the world, search where you live, and it'll bring up a map of your area, and it will show you everybody's home weather stations that have connected onto their website, and it'll show you the temperatures. And by doing that, even if you don't have a weather station, you can see what the lows and the highs, the wind, the rain, everything in your location. Pretty much, if you've got one pretty close to you, it's going to be pretty accurate to where you live if it's very close. There's literally thousands of weather stations connected, so mine's on there as well. And I've found the temperatures recorded on my weather station are pretty much the same, within a degree or so, of other weather stations close by. So I find it really accurate that way. It's not gone out either, so it's solar powered with a battery in it, and the signal's been strong. It's kept all the time. I've had no issues with it whatsoever. I will do a full review of that weather station, but I want to give it a good season, so I want it to get it through winter and spring and summer. I'll probably do a review of autumn, winter of this year coming, so we can see how well it's coped with the British climate and see if it's still accurate. That's a really good one to get. I wish sold it in the UK direct, but they don't yet. I did have to pay for the expensive shipping and the VAT on top as well, but I think it's worth it because it's been really good so far. Okay, let's see what else. Hello Motorsports from Colorado Springs. The worst place to try and have a garden, Colorado Springs. I don't know that part of the world, so you have to tell me why it's so bad. I'm guessing continental climate again. It's going to be very, very cold in winter, but nice warm summers, I'm guessing. They're pretty hard. Maciusz from Poland, how are you doing? So, good question from Maciusz is about something that you very rarely gets talked about anywhere that I've seen on the internet, and that is the fabled Trachycarpus ravenii. The Trachycarpus ravenii, basically nobody knows much about it, so you probably know more than me, Maciusz. Basically, it's a really, really rare species that I don't think is in cultivation in the West. I think it's in habitat in the Far East, but it's not in cultivation anywhere as far as I'm aware. I've never seen anybody growing it or talking about it, so I've never grown it. Obviously, if somebody got some seeds, it'd be great if we could get seeds and we could try growing that Trachycarpus and seeing if it's different from the other species. Is it a garden-worthy plant? Is it hardy? Just don't know, because I don't think anybody's growing it. But if you are growing it, or you know somebody's growing it, then let me know in the chat below. So Michael asked about adding compost manure to a bed without messing about the roots of evergreen established plants. This is easy. You just basically, you don't need to dig it in, especially if you put it in autumn or winter. You just place it where you want it, shovel it about on the ground around your plants that you don't want to disturb the roots of, and let over winter, you'll get the rain, the frost, that will start breaking it down and drawing it down into the ground. But then you've got all the organisms in the soil that will do all the work for you. You've got the worms will do the major part of actually literally feeding through the compost and soil and bringing it down. You've got the smaller microorganisms breaking it down as well. And then you've got the bigger mammals doing the work. You might not want them, but you'll probably have moles. You might have even rats and mice and burrowing animals as well. From time to time, that'll be doing sort of the big mechanical moving the compost down. Obviously, you don't really want a lot of those big rodents doing that, but you will have a few from time to time doing that. But mainly the smaller things, and mainly the earthworms, will be drawing down all the big particles of compost and manure over the winter, over the spring, and then you're not having to get a fork or a spade and digging through the feeding roots of established evergreen plants and trees. You don't want to be breaking up all those roots, so you want to keep it intact. So put a layer of compost on, and it'll be drawn through and down and mixed in, over 6 months to a year or so. If you put it in autumn and winter, by spring and summer, then the nutrients and everything will be mixed in with that topsoil. You might not notice it to begin with, but it will eventually break down and get moved in. You don't want to pile any compost or manure, especially if it's fresh manure, which I wouldn't say is a good thing to use in the garden anyway, around the trunk or base of trees, because you might get sort of burning or rotting against the bark, so you want to make sure it's not actually touching. But as long as you've got a distance away, then it doesn't matter if you have it nice and thick. And a good thing about putting down compost and manure in winter and spring is it's acting as an insulator for those roots if it's really, really cold as well. So that's a good thing to do. We're coming up to an hour, so I think we'll do one more random question and then we'll call it a night. Let's have a look. So, last question is going to be from Ben Wolfenden, and he's asking about splitting Musabaju in spring. So, yeah, Musabaju, the hardy banana plant, it grows many stems from basically quite a thick rhizome base, and you can split this. Best to do it when it starts growing in spring, so really sort of April onwards, I would say, maybe May and June. You can split it, and you can be quite ruthless with it. You need a bit of root. The hardest thing is getting some root, because sometimes you'll find the stem will be here, like that, but the actual roots, everything over here, and it's just done a bit of an underground rhizome stem going out that way. You cut down here, thinking you've got a plant with some roots, you can end up with absolutely nothing. You've just got basically a dead stem because it's got no roots, no way of growing new roots from that part of the stem and rhizome, because its base, the feeding roots, are all over here. Do it like that. So you want to make sure, if you want to get this growing stem of Musabaju, you actually cut it here, so you're going to get some feeding roots attached to the stem. So be really careful if you've got a big plant to get rid of some of the soil. Use a fork, use your hands, and look for the roots, and then make sure you get some roots before you divide it. I divided a big clump last year from the front garden, which was getting too big, because it was close to the house, didn't need protecting, and it was getting really, really big. So I wanted to move to the back garden, and I did that, I want to say, end of May. The plants sulked a lot, so they did hardly anything in the garden till August. They just sat there for 2 or 3 months. Even though it was early summer and summer, nice and warm, I well watered it. Because there wasn't that many roots when I divided it, it sulked. They're great now. They came through, come September, October, they were pushing out big leaves, but they sulked all summer and didn't do that early big display, which you thought you might get from such a fast-growing plant because I just divided it. I'm hoping this year, the year after division, they'll all grow really well and have nice big leaves. So that's, divide in spring, but just make sure you get roots for every division, otherwise they won't survive. Right, the hour is up, so thank you for watching this edition of Exotic Gardening Live. My name is Yorkshire Kris. If you enjoyed the programme and you've not subscribed, please do so. It really helps out my channel. And we're very, very close to 10,000 subscribers. When we hit 10,000 subscribers, one UK viewer, I can't do it to anybody else, but a UK viewer will receive a sought after onset Haniba banana, which are really rare, really fast growing, and I'll post one out free, or you can pick up from here free. There'll be a competition. I'll explain all once we've hit 10,000 subscribers. We're at 9,500 at the moment, so we shouldn't be too far off 10,000. So I'll leave that thought with you. If you've not subscribed, please do so, and thank you for watching.